This morning we're going to learn more about our National Mall, and we're going to review our cause and effect skills. So, we already learned a little bit about the National Mall, but who wants to tell me what they've learned so far? Olivia, I saw your hand. You forgot? Okay, John Parker?
So, the park is miles long.
It is long. What else have we learned about it, Olivia? I'm sorry, Willow.
The four presidents that
Yeah. Have we learned anything else? Ethan?
the Capitol is right by it.
Yes. So, we've learned the National Mall is a national park that has many monuments, memorials, and museums. And we've learned that the National Mall takes up 146 acres of land, and it's almost 2 miles long. So that's really big. So who wants to tell me what this first monument is? Jacob.
She's got to leave it on so she can be.
No. Jackson?
The Washington Monument.
Correct. That's our Washington Monument. What's the second building? Ethan?
Capitol.
Good job. See, y'all are showing me y'all know so much. So I got to live in D.C. for a summer, and I worked on Capitol Hill at the Capitol building for a congressman from Alabama. So I did tours of the Capitol, and I learned a lot. So that's why I have all these pictures. And this is the speaker's balcony, and you can see the Washington Monument in the distance. Yes, Willow?
Is this during your home?
Huh?
Is this during your home?
No, this was before. This was in 2016. So it's been a few years. Y'all were in, what, kindergarten?
No. Yeah, probably. I was
You're 4? So it was before y'all were even in school.
I was probably in preschool.
So let's talk a little bit about what's at the National Mall. So we know there's memorials, monuments, and museums. So these are all our presidential monuments, and we have one for a historical leader. Do we know who Martin Luther King Jr. is? Let's see. We do know who he is? Yes. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about him later today. And so this is a picture from the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial. This is his wife, Eleanor, and she played a big part in his presidency. And then we're going to talk about some more memorials. So who knows what this building is? This monument. Allocate. The what?
The White House.
No, that's not the White House. Olivia.
I think it's the Lincoln Memorial.
Good job. And what bill is the Lincoln Memorial on? What dollar bill? Let's see. Let's see. Madison?
A dollar bill? No.
No, it's not on the dollar.
Oh, penny.
Jackson.
$5 bill.
Yes, it's on the $5 bill.
Oh, I thought it was on a penny.
He is on the penny too, but you can see him better on the $5 bill.
Yeah.
So who knows what this monument is? Let's see. I'm getting a lot of the same hands. Bristol.
The Lincoln Memorial?
No, we just looked at the Lincoln Memorial. John Parker.
Thomas Jefferson?
Yes, it's the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. And what point is he on? Olivia.
I'm looking at the nickel.
He is on the nickel. Good job. So do we know what memorial this is? Good job. That is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. And what do we know him from? Let's see. Angeline, do you know what he's from? No? Ethan looks excited.
Ended slavery?
No, he didn't end slavery.
That
was Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, that was Abraham Lincoln.
Let's see. Olivia?
He was fighting for peace.
He did worked towards getting peace for our country. Jackson?
He'd help black people throughout life. Like, if there was a restaurant that said white people only, he wanted to make it to where black people were treated equally.
So that's true, and we call that the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah, that's right.
So do we know when that movement happened?
1968.
It happened during the early 1960s.
Oh, he was dead. You were not even alive.
No, that happened when my grandparents were young.
Whoa.
Yeah, that happened a long time ago.
Like,
So, okay, do we know what memorial this is? No, it's not the Teddy Roosevelt. This is a war memorial. Bristol? I'm sorry, not Bristol, Olivia? No, not the Civil War. This is the World War II memorial. So, and you'll see all these pillars around, and each state has a pillar. So here's the Alabama pillar, and it has a reef on it too.
What's a pillar?
So it's like a column.
Like you going up and down?
Yeah, so it goes up and down,
Why?
and we call it a pillar. So each state has its own pillar, and then we see these archways on both sides that represent the two oceans that touch the United States, the Pacific and the Atlantic.
How did the Pacific get all? Well, how did the Atlantic get all the way over there?
Okay, so this is the Korean War Memorial, and this is the Vietnam War Memorial.
Oh, I know that one.
Do you know that one?
I watched a video about that. That war was a deadly war for
Yeah. Yes? Do you have a question? No? Okay.
I was going to ask what memorial that one was.
So, let's talk some about our museums at the National Mall. We have almost 15 museums.
Wow.
I know, that's a lot. We have museums for art, for the Botanic Gardens, for National Air and Space. So they have rockets and airplanes. Yes, there's one for natural history. Yeah, what's your question, Ethan?
Is there one for Native American?
There is.
African American. African or
There's African American, there's Native American.
what's the fourth one?
The fourth one is the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum.
Oh.
So that is something related to World War II, and you'll learn more about that when you get into older grades. Not college, you'll learn about it before then. 6th grade. Yeah. What is it?
In the middle.
Yes, when you're in middle school. So, and then one other thing on the National Mall is a historic carousel, and that's what we're going to learn about today. So, let's look a little bit more at our museum. So, this is the National Mall, right? So, this building right here is the Native American Museum. And then this is another museum, so they go up both sides of the National Mall.
What's in the middle?
In the middle, it's a green space.
No, like what's that?
This was set up for the 4th of July celebration. So they do a lot of fireworks and they celebrate. And then this is the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. That's where all our money's made.
Cool.
Isn't that
Money is made from trees.
So here's a picture of the carousel we're going to learn about. And then this is the Smithsonian Castle. So who knows who likes Alabama football? I like Alabama football.
I don't like football.
Huh?
I like football.
So who knows who Bear Bryant is? You know who Bear Bryant is?
I forgot.
He's the quarterback? No, he's a famous Alabama football coach. So, and he wore these houndstooth hats, and one is kept at the Smithsonian Castle, and one of the crystal footballs that was a national championship trophy is also kept there.
What's the hat for?
So when you have a national championship, you get a trophy.
No, what's the hat?
The hat, that's what he wore. He always wore a houndstooth hat.
No, but why they put it in the
Because it's historical.
Was it important?
Yes, it's very important to him. So let's talk about some questions before we read our story. So do we know what a law is?
Yes.
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 Who wants to tell us what a law is?
Oh.
Connor.
Something not to do.
Well, yeah, you're not supposed to break the law. Madison.
A law is a rule created by
The government. Good job. So let's talk about segregation. Do we know what segregation is? So segregation was some laws that were enforced during the 1960s and before. And segregation is...
Teachers, pardon the interruption. Anyone going to recess today, please stay off the playground area. We've got some folks working out in that area today. The track area is still open, but please stay off the playground. Thank you.
So segregation is the enforced separation of different racial groups in a country, community, or establishment. So that means we would be separated based on the color of our skin. And that's not right, is it? No, that's wrong. So that means some of our friends in here wouldn't be in our classroom if we still had segregation laws. And that's not good. That's not nice at all. No, yeah, we don't want that. So what is the civil rights movement? We kind of touched on that already. Willow.
The civil rights movement in the United States was a age-long struggle by African Americans and their like-minded aliens to end segregation.
Good job. So that means that people in our country worked together, despite the color of their skin, to try to end these laws. And then, do we know where the civil rights movement started? Jackson.
Montgomery?
It did start in Montgomery.
Alabama.
Yeah, it started right here in Alabama. And you'll learn more about that later this year. So, let's talk about what a protest is. So, a protest is a statement or action expressing a disapproval of an objection to something. So, why do we protest? Bristol.
People protest when they not agree with something.
Good job. So, what would be something that we could protest today?
I can answer the next question. The way how we do certain things, like the way how we may want to count by nines, or like.
Yeah, we could protest math because we didn't like math. But we shouldn't. We need to know math. See, we don't want to make Miss Chumley sad. We need to know math, so we don't want to protest math. Yeah, math is fun.
I know how to get count by nines.
Yes, Miss Chumley?
Something we can protest peacefully and respectfully.
What?
Recess every day.
We could protest recess. So, okay, we already talked about Martin Luther King Jr. He was a civil rights leader. He helped to lead everyone to get the civil rights movement going.
I saw the book and he made every black and white people get together.
He did. He helped to bring us together. And so when did segregation end? Ella Kate.
1964.
Good job. So that was a long time ago. That was before I was born. Miss Chomley was born. Yeah, long before any of y'all were born.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Since you were born? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's my grandpa.
So we're going to read A Ride to Remember. And so I put the pictures in the slides so y'all could see them too, because I can't come around because of Corona. So we're going to read A Ride to Remember, a civil rights story by Sharon Langley and Amy Nathan. I love carousels. The horses come in so many colors. Black, white, brown, gray, a honey shade of tan. Sunny yellow, fire engine red, or even a soft baby blue. No matter their color, the horses all go the same speed. As they circle around and around, they start together, they finish together. Nobody is first and nobody is last. Everyone is equal when you ride a carousel. So who's ridden a carousel? Everybody's ridden a carousel, right?
Have you?
Yes, I've ridden a carousel. Okay. When I was a very little girl, my family lived in Baltimore. Near our house was an amusement park. It was green and grassy, big and beautiful, bright and shiny. There were rides and games, treats and cold drinks at Gwen Amusement Park, and a carousel too. But before I was born, there was no rides or sweets at the park for children like me. Was it because kids didn't have money to buy tickets, I asked Mama. No, it wasn't about money, I said Mama. Or was it because they lived too far away from the park, I asked. That wasn't the problem either, said Daddy. Then why, I wondered aloud. It was because of an unfair rule the park had, Daddy explained. The rule said that African Americans couldn't go on any of the rides. Could we go there to have a picnic or fly a kite, I asked. No, we couldn't, said Mama. We wouldn't have been welcome there, said Daddy. That's terrible, I said. Yes, it was, Mama said. It was segregation, keeping people apart because of their race. Treating people differently because of the color of their skin, Daddy added. What about the golden rule, I asked. What about treating other people the way you wanted to be treated? I guess some people forgot that the golden rule is supposed to include everyone, said Mama. Sorry, I thought it stopped recording. For a long time, black and white kids couldn't do many things together. They couldn't go to the same schools or to the same restaurants and libraries, or even together at the movies. It was the law. Why didn't somebody do something about those kinds of laws, I asked. They did, said Mama. We did, said Daddy. Many people, both blacks and whites, knew that segregation was unfair and just plain wrong. Some people said, just wait, times will change, but others said, why wait? What's wrong with now? They held protests at the restaurants, stores, and movie theaters. They tried to get officials in courts to make new laws to create a better city, a place that would welcome and include all people. By the time I was born, some unfair laws had changed in Baltimore. Kids could go to the same schools and libraries, restaurants, and some movie theaters too, no matter the color of their skin. But the amusement park just wouldn't budge, said Daddy. How does that make you feel? That is sad. It wouldn't be good to not be able to go to places without your classmates or your friends, right? Yeah, that's not good at all.
No.
People who were fed up with segregation made plans to hold huge protests at the amusement park. They spread the word to churches, synagogues, schools, and other places in the community so that many people could take part in the protest. They invited newspapers and television stations to report on the protest. They told the police chief about their plans so the police could keep the peace. Best of all, they picked a perfect summer day for the big event. A day when people celebrate what's best about America, said Mama. What day do you think they chose? What day do y'all think they chose to protest? Jackson?
4th of July.
Good job. The 4th of July, I said. That's right, a day that stands for freedom, said Mama. Did they have fireworks, I asked. They had something even better. Hundreds of people, black and white, young and old, students, teachers, priests, ministers, and rabbis, all came together on July 4th, 1963 to take part in one of the biggest protests that the city had ever had, said Daddy. They believed in the golden rule, that being fair is the right thing to do, said Mama. First, the protesters went to a church to pray, sing freedom songs, and get ready. They spent the morning learning how to be peaceful protesters, how not to use their fists to fight back. Then they climbed on their buses to go to the amusement park. They brought signs and banners that declared their message of fairness for all. When the protesters reached the park, a crowd of angry faces greeted them. People who didn't want the park to change. They shouted insults at the protesters. Protesters just held their signs high and sang freedom songs. "We shall overcome." The civil rights anthem filled the air, said Daddy. But when they tried to go into the park to buy tickets, blacks and whites together, the park's owners had the protesters arrested. So they did what they had been taught to do, to protest peacefully. Some sat down on the ground and refused to move. Police officers had to carry them to buses to take them to the police station. Mama and Daddy explained that almost 300 protesters were arrested that day. Some paid a fine and could go home, but half refused to pay their fines. They chose to spend the night in jail instead. When they went home the next day, they began planning another protest for 2 days later on July 7th. Kids helped too, Mama said. A newspaper reporter even asked 11-year-old Lydia Finney and her Aunt Mabel Grant to go on a secret protest at the park. They both had light-colored skin. He thought the park's ticket taker might not know they were black. On the morning of the second protest, Lydia and her aunt walked up to the ticket booth. They bought tickets and walked right in. They could have been arrested if anyone found out who they were, but nobody noticed. They stayed for 2 hours and went on some rides, including the carousel. When they left, the protesters weren't there yet, but the reporter was. He interviewed them and wrote about their visit to the show. To show what a mistake it is to judge people by the color of their skin. Getting funny. When the protesters arrived for the second protest, police arrested nearly 100 protesters, blacks and whites who tried to enter the park together. Among the youngest taken to the police station were 3 young white boys who joined the protest with their parents. Tom, John, and Steve Coleman. Photos of those boys and their parents being arrested and put in police cars appeared in the newspaper the next day. "Those photos shocked many people," said Mama. "Arresting a family for trying to ride a carousel? Ridiculous," I said. "Exactly," said Mama. The stories about the protests in newspapers and on television made more people decide that segregation had to go. So many people spoke out against the park that its owners saw that they had to change. The park owners agreed to let everyone come to the park, no matter their skin color. All arrest charges against the protesters were dropped too. The first day Gwen Oak Amusement Park was open to all was August 28, 1963, 1 month before my first birthday. Mama told me that at first she was afraid to take me to the park. Would we be safe? Would we be arrested? But she and Daddy decided that it was important for us to be there that first day as a family. On August 28, 1963, we were the first African American family to walk into Gwen Oak Amusement Park. When it was open to all, no angry faces greeted us, only smiling news reporters and photographers who rushed around us. Daddy said that he marched me straight over to the carousel. He helped me onto the big smiling horse. He put his arms around me and held my hand, so I wouldn't be afraid. Mama stood nearby, waving. Photographers jumped onto the ride with us. They took photos of Daddy and me, because I was the first African American child to go on the ride that day. Before the carousel started turning, white kids climbed onto the horses beside me. They were big kids who could probably ride by themselves. But one girl's mother asked Daddy to keep an eye on her daughter to make sure she didn't fall off the horse. Daddy was glad to help. He kept watch on all of us kids, keeping us all safe. The next day, newspapers had stories about my carousel ride. There was my name, Sharon Langley, right in the newspaper. There were photos of Daddy and me, and of all the other kids with me. It had been a big day, a new day for everyone who was at the amusement park with us. So who is that? We talked about him earlier. Good job. On August 28th was also an important day for a man who was trying to end unfair rules everywhere. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On that very day, Dr. King was at a huge protest in Washington. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Hundreds of thousands of people joined him to call for an end to segregation everywhere. Dr. King told the crowd about his hopes and dreams that one day black children and white children would live together peacefully in this country, treating each other as brothers and sisters. My carousel ride showed that Dr. King's dream was already coming true. That was a long time ago. The amusement park isn't there anymore. A big storm destroyed many of the rides at Gwinnett Oak Amusement Park. A big storm destroyed many of the rides, and Gwinnett Oak Amusement Park had to close. Now it's a park where families have picnics on sunny afternoons, and where neighborhood kids play ball. On its green, grassy fields stands a sign to help people remember those who took a stand for justice that day. The carousel came through the storm just fine and was moved to Washington, D.C. on the National Mall. It's fitting that it should be there, near the monuments that stand for freedom, not far from the Lincoln Memorial where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King stood to give his famous speech during the March on Washington. My name, Sharon Langley, was put on one of the horse's saddles, and on it, one of its horseshoes too. A sign on the carousel fence tells about my ride to remember on that sunny August day so long ago. Today, big kids, little kids, young kids, and old kids, no matter the color of their skin, can ride on any carousel, going round and round on horses painted all colors of the rainbow. Nobody first, nobody last, everyone equal, having fun together. And then there's some pictures from the carousel of Sharon Langley and her dad. That's one of the pictures from the newspaper. And that's a picture of it being moved to Washington. Yes, Willow?
We have the same thing with the things up right there.
Yeah. Huh?
It's quick and fun. Oh, Martin Luther King.
Yeah, we do have some books about him.
Right there, the first book.
Yeah.
I read
So what do y'all think of the story?
Yeah.
You like the story? So what was the main idea of the story?
To talk about white and black trying to get together.
So let's hear from Olivia.
This is about treating all people fair and not judging them by their skin color.
Yes. Do you have something to add, Jackson?
About civil rights.
Yeah, it is about civil rights. All those answers are good. So what did we learn about the civil rights movement?
It doesn't matter if your skin is different color than other people.
Yeah,
It doesn't
so
matter.
we learned that we shouldn't judge people based on their skin color, right? And then we learned that people worked together to end segregation laws. So what did we learn about the carousel at the National Mall? Ethan?
They moved it because they thought it would be a good place for it to be right by the National Mall.
Yeah, so they moved it there because it was affected by segregation laws, and they worked to end that at the amusement park, and those memorials and monuments represent freedom, right?
Did they put yes. Did
Yeah.
they put another one in?
No, so there's only one carousel at the National Mall.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it's still there.
It doesn't look old.
No, they keep it up. They renovate it and make it look nice. They keep it looking good.
It's been
So what did we learn about Martin Luther King Jr.?
that he was a good guy.
Yeah, he was a good guy. What else did we learn about him? Olivia?
That he fought for not being judged as
Yeah, we shouldn't judge somebody on the color of their skin. So what did he do?
He made the black people and white people can go in together.
Yeah. So y'all have some really good answers. So now we're going to do a cause and effect activity. So if you'll get your whiteboard expo marker and eraser out. And then Miss Chumley, do you want to pull anyone else to the round table?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
I'm gonna be taking this.
Okay. Do you need one?
Stay right there.
Okay, yes. Come get one.
I can't find my eraser.
Well, look good. Look good for it.
Hey, Miss Hamilton.
Yes, ma'am?
After you get them all situated, if they eat their snack while they
Yes.
work,
So once you get your whiteboard out and your expo marker, go ahead and get your snack out. We're gonna eat snack while we do this group activity.
you good?
I just wanted to get me.
You're fine. Alright.
Yeah, they're right there. Look, get a black one. The eraser or the eraser? Are they in
Right,
there?
so bring your snack and come back here. Addie, get your snack and come back here.
You need a marker too?
Here.
You need an eraser?
I knew what you're gonna
Okay.
say. I knew you were gonna say that.
Braxton, get your snack and come back.
Are you gonna sit here with me? Or are you going back to the room?
I just had a feeling you were gonna say
Okay, so now that we all have our whiteboards out, I want you to draw a line down the middle of it.
the whole piece of paper.
Yeah, draw a line down the middle.
So she's showing you to draw in the line down the middle. Addie could go to the back.
Yeah, draw one right down the middle.
Draw a line.
Yeah, go right here. Good job. Okay, and once you have your line, you're gonna put 1 and 2 on each side. So it should, your whiteboard should look like this.
One.
Good job, Faye.
Make your blue.
So give me a thumbs up when you're ready.
She said, yeah. She said one.
Okay, just waiting on a couple more.
Garrett. Put a one.
Okay, so
One. Put a two.
we have 2 cause and effects right here, and we have 4 options. So for our first one, Sharon wanted to go to the park by her house, and we're missing our effect. So what do you think our effect is? Segregation laws prevented Sharon from going to the park. Protesters tried to buy tickets to the amusement park. Our protesters were arrested and taken to jail. Or people were tired of segregation laws. So I want you to write the answer under your 1 on your whiteboard. So you'll write A, B, or C, or D.
So do we like just write the whole sentence?
No, you just write the letters. So A, B, C, or D. So what was the effect?
Okay.
Sharon wanted to go to the park by her house.
The park by her house. That was the cause.
So I want you to write it down, and we're going to review in a minute.
What's the effect? Was it
So,
segregation?
do I need to go back to the story and read?
Sharon from going to the park.
yes?
Just read the question.
B.
Oh, okay. Read the question.
No, like the A, B, C, D.
Segregation laws prevented Sharon from going to the park. Protesters tried to buy tickets to the amusement park. Protesters were arrested and taken to jail. People were tired of segregation laws. So what happened after Sharon wanted to go to the park?
She just wanted to go to the park. Was she allowed to go to the park?
So let's go back and look at our story.
Was she allowed to go to the park?
Okay, so I'm going to read from the story.
She wanted to go ride on the police bus. She
When I was a very little girl, my family lived in Baltimore. Near our house was an amusement park. It was green and grassy, big and beautiful, bright and shiny. There were rides and games, treats and the cold drinks at Gwen Oak Amusement Park. And the carousel too. But before I was born, there were no rides or sweets for children like me. Was it because kids didn't have money to buy tickets? I asked Mama. No, it wasn't about money, said Mama. Or was it because they lived too far from the park? I asked. That wasn't the problem either, said Daddy. Then why? I wondered aloud. So what prevented Sharon and her family from going to the park? Ethan?
Because there's a law that only white people can only go.
Good job. So what did we call those laws?
Segregation.
So what would our answer be for this first one? A. So let's go ahead and write A under our 1. So let's look at the second one. We have the effect. Protests were held at the amusement park. What caused that? What was our cause that protests were held at the amusement park? So we know it's not A. We already filled in A. So protesters tried to buy tickets to the amusement park. Protesters were arrested and taken to jail. Our people were tired of segregation laws. Olivia?
I think it's the last one.
D? Okay, so let's go with D. So put D under 2. So let's go and review them next. So we were right. We looked at the story right, and we found our answer. And then Olivia remembered from the story that people were tired of segregation laws, right? So, okay, go ahead and erase the A and B, but leave your line in your 1 and 2.
So take your eraser and just erase the A and the B.
Okay, so we have another set. We have our causes, but we're missing our effects, right? So let's read our causes. Protesters tried to buy tickets to the amusement park. And protests continued, and more stories began to appear on television and newspapers. Oh, okay. Let me wake it up.
Wait, they had television back then?
Yes, they still had television. Television's been around for a long time. So let's read our answers. Sharon wanted to go to the park by her house. The amusement park owners agreed to end segregation of the park. Protesters were arrested and taken to jail. People were tired of segregation laws.
You saw B and C.
So, protesters tried to buy tickets to the amusement park. What would be the effect?
Then protesters were arrested.
So, what do we remember from the story? What would our answer be?
C.
Let's raise our hand. Connor?
C.
C. Yes. So, let's go ahead and put C under number 1 for us.
We have A and C on number 1, right? I guess number B is no.
We're going to put C here.
I thought it was A.
No, that was for our last set. We're on to a new set, so we got to write C right here, okay? Well, no, you can erase them, so we're going to write C. Good job. So number 2, protests continued and more stories began to appear on television and newspaper. So we know it's not C. So what, out of our other answers, what would our answer be?
B.
B? Is everybody saying B? Raise your hand if you think it's B. Okay, so let's go with B. So go ahead and write B right here.
Number 2.
Yes.
Wait, what is the answer again?
B. So go ahead and write B right here. Okay, so let's check and see if we were right. And we were. Y'all are getting this cause and effect thing down. So let's do our last set.
Yay!
So this is our last set. So you got erase your C and B. So we're missing our causes and we have our effects. So Sharon's name and picture were in the newspaper. And the carousel was moved to the National Mall in Washington, D.C.
I got this.
So, segregation laws prevented Sharon from going to the park. A storm destroyed the amusement park and was forced to close. Protesters were arrested and taken to jail. Sharon was the first African American girl to ride the carousel. Willow, what do you think our first answer is?
D.
D. Who else thinks it's D? Okay, y'all are good. So let's write D under number 1.
D.
D.
Like Captain D.
Okay, so let's look at our second one. The carousel was moved to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. So we know it's not D. So what else would have caused the carousel to be moved to D.C.? Let's see. Let's call in somebody I haven't called on. Madison, do you know our answer? No? Okay. Let's see. Bristol? B? Who else thinks it's B? Okay, put B under number 2. And let's check to see if we're right. And y'all did good. Y'all are 100. Good job. So, and that's the end of my lesson. Y'all did a great job.